I'd like to read you some sections of a current government commissioned review of social care that really seems to be getting to the heart of things. Now, this isn't in our area, but it's very close to our area. And it shows how people are beginning to realise that things are completely wrong and have got to change. Okay, there are quite a few quotes from this. I won't read it out in the funny voice because I agree with this. The regulator is in danger of creating a climate whereby the inspected manage for inspection rather than managing for quality and outcomes for clients. For some, following rules and being compliant can appear less risky.
Excuse me,
Yeah? Thanks. Can appear less risky than carrying out the personal responsibility for exercising judgment. This is what professionals do. They exercise judgment, they make difficult decisions. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but they make them for good reasons. That's the professional task. Compliance with regulation and rules often drives professional practice more than sound judgment drawn from the professional relationship and interaction with the client. The performance and inspection systems in place do not adequately examine the quality of direct work with clients or its impact. A lot of data is collected, some required nationally and some developed locally, which is said to describe performance, but in many cases it does not describe what matters, and it consumes a disproportionate amount of time and resource. Social workers and other professionals have told the review that more managerial focus is being given to complying with top-down regulation and often further locally designed procedures than to providing a personalised service that matches the variety of needs of clients. The electronic forms have altered social work in an unhealthy way. The purpose of assessment is to safeguard and promote the welfare of the client. This has been forgotten in favour of a primary purpose of filling in the forms. The system has become over-bureaucratised. So it's not just me saying it, it's this extremely well-regarded, well-researched, government-commissioned inquiry or review. It's become over-bureaucratised and focused on meeting targets, which reduces the capacity of social workers to spend time with clients and develop meaningful relationships with them. There is a risk that they will be deprived of the care and respect that they deserve. The clients who have contributed so far to the review confirm that they do not feel as though they are centrally important and held in mind by their social worker. We now have a defensive professional culture which in some instances results in a drive to follow rules where instead judgment is required. As the review progresses, further consideration will be given to ways in which professional dependence on prescriptive rules can be replaced by a mixture of best professional principles and guided judgment. Social workers tell the review that guidance can be useful, but that the burden of guidance is preventing independent thinking, and that social workers want to be given more space to use their professional judgment. I've got a bit more. Sorry. I think, this review is 100 pages long. I've picked out these bits. And these do represent the thinking. The inspection system, too, has been criticised for being too focused on adherence to processes. Process has its place, but grade descriptors, like star ratings, largely measure conformity to process, and they should not be used as a proxy to measuring the quality of practice or outcomes. Inspection systems need to be fundamentally reformed so that providers are not stigmatized for acknowledging problems, but instead are helped and supported and praised for recognizing when more work needs to be done. There is frustration that an imbalance has developed between the demands of the management and inspection process and the professional's ability to exercise judgment, arising from efforts to deal with uncertainty and often shaping practice in adverse ways. And this is the last bit. As the review progresses, further consideration will be given to ways in which professionals' dependence on prescriptive rules can be replaced with a mixture, I've said this before, sorry, with a mixture of best professional principles and guided judgment informed by a strong professional body, which is where ACM comes in. Okay, anybody heard that before, or, I mean, anybody got an idea of where it comes from?
It was from the Deaf Baby P, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, when they had the review about social work practice.
Great.
In Haringey.
Well done. Yeah, it's a widespread review now that has developed because they realise that social work and the inspection of social work has gone wrong with children. They put in more, in response to succeeding tragedies, they put in more and more and more paperwork, rules and forms, which meant that the social workers couldn't actually work with the children or the families. So what they were doing was minding their backs all the time, filling in the forms. Inspectors came along and said, yeah, that's fine, you've got, everything's right. And these tragedies went on happening. So they put more in and more in. And at last somebody's realised, come on, we've got to look at this. This isn't going to work ever. So, it's the Monroe Review of Social Care for Children and Young People. But everything there applies exactly to adult social care. And I think that's next. And that's what we've been campaigning for, a really fundamental look at where we're going with this, because the more paperwork we've got and the more bureaucracy is taking away from care. And that's what care managers are there to manage, the care. They're not there to sit at a computer all the time trying to fill in forms that are difficult to understand. Over the last 10 years, our service has been dominated by the demands of inspection. But it's not the job of inspection or regulation to dictate how care homes should be run. They don't know, and they couldn't do it if they tried. I would be the first to admit that the national minimum standards, by and large, led to a great improvement across the board. Most standards were sensible and well explained. There was at last a benchmark by which all homes could be judged. However, first NCSC, remember that, National Care Standards Commission, and then CSCI, CSCI, managed to forget what the national minimum standards were for. They thought they had been created to create them. They thought that was the basis of their whole creation. NCSC said this is the most important development in social care for 40 years or something. They thought they were the story. And that mentality has gone on ever since. Look at their grand conferences and their glossy publications. They issue paper over and over again about nothing. For all of the standards were headed by outcomes. If you look at the national minimum standards, they were all headed by outcomes. But instead of inspecting those, these self-important bureaucracies invented ever more demanding and time-consuming hoops for care homes to jump through. the outcomes were perfectly sensible. Outcome, one of them, you've got to have a room that suits the resident. Does the resident's room suit them? It wasn't about measurements and everything else. It wasn't about having a certain amount of furniture. It was actually, does this room suit this person? And, when I was an inspector, and ever since, I've seen small rooms that the resident actually wants a small room, a small bare room. They may later, and this happens particularly in mental health services, they may later want something, begin to want to put pictures up. But I'm sure most of you have come across people who, there are pictures in the room, and they say, they're frightened of something in the picture, or a mirror, for instance. Or they don't want furniture cluttering up the room. They want as little responsibility as possible. Now, it's up to the inspector to realise, by talking with that resident, I see why this room is as it is. So, care homes began to work for inspection rather than for residents. And worse was to come when CSCI introduced star rating, because even though the ratings were so often inaccurate and inconsistent, CSCI at the same time began to penalise local authorities for funding residents in low-rated homes. So they lost stars if they placed people in low-rated homes, even if that low-rated home was just the place for this resident. So getting 2 or 3 stars was vital to survival. This wouldn't have been so bad if the ratings were accurate and were about the real care of residents. But too often the ratings were more about pleasing the regulator than caring for the residents. So, if current inspection under CQC isn't fit for purpose, what do we want in its place? Well, this is what ACM are campaigning for. I'll come to, sorry. Equity and Excellence, the white paper, Liberating the NHS, proposes the strengthening of CQC. I was very disappointed when I first read that. But it'll be a very different organisation from the one we've come to know. Healthwatch holds the key to the future of care home inspection. Healthwatch England will be established by 2012 as part of CQC, and Local Healthwatch will replace and expand on the role of links. Although it concentrates almost exclusively on health services, the white paper contains some messages of hope for those of us who want a return to effective care home inspection practice. Establishing local Healthwatch organisations by 2012 provides the possibility for regular local inspections, reviving an effective complaint system tied into inspection, and the formal involvement of residents and relatives. I can't believe that CQC will be allowed to remain bogged down in this senseless bureaucracy. The re-registration of care homes has been totally unnecessary and has caused havoc amongst providers. Inspectors have no time to inspect, and residents are left paying for a service they don't receive. ACM supports effective inspection that's locally based and geared to the well-being and safety of care home residents.